My sister Bianca accused me of embezzling thousands from our dying grandfather, and my parents backed her vicious lies in court to cut me out of the will. But they didn't know one man was watching from the back, holding the document that would ruin them all. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence in the lawyer's waiting room wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and tasted like metallic dread. I sat on the edge of the plush leather chair, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had turned a ghostly white. I was still wearing black. We all were. Grandfather Arthur had been in the ground for less than 48 hours, and yet, here we were. The grieving period hadn't even properly begun before the vultures started circling. Across the room, my sister, Bianca, was scrolling on her phone. The artificial blue light illuminated her face, highlighting the perfect contouring and the boredom in her eyes. She sighed loudly, a dramatic exhale that was meant to signal her inconvenience to everyone in the room. She checked her watch, a gold Cartier that I knew for a fact Grandfather Arthur had paid for 2 Christmases ago, and then looked at our parents. "How much longer is this going to take?" Bianca whined, snapping her gum. "I have a flight to Chelum in the morning, and I need to pack." My mother, Amelia, reached over and patted Bianca's knee soothingly. "Hush now, sweetie, it won't be long. Mr. Henderson just needs to get the files in order." My father, Cameron, sat with his arms crossed, staring at the wall just above my head. He hadn't looked me in the eye since the funeral. Actually, he hadn't looked me in the eye since the day Grandfather Arthur took his last breath in the hospice bed I had set up in his living room. There was a coldness radiating from him, a specific kind of icy detachment that I couldn't quite understand. I assumed it was grief. I assumed everyone handled the loss of a patriarch differently. I was wrong. "Riley, stop shaking your leg," Cameron snapped suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet like a whip. "It's distracting." "Sorry," I whispered, freezing instantly. "I'm just anxious. I miss him." Bianca snorted, not looking up from her phone. "Please, you miss the control you had over him." I turned to her stunned. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she said, finally locking eyes with me. Her gaze wasn't sad, it was predatory. "You spent the last 3 years playing nursemaid, isolating him from the rest of us. Don't act like you did it out of the goodness of your heart." "I did it because no one else would," I shot back, my voice rising. "I moved in. I changed his catheters. I managed his meds. You visited twice last year, Bianca, twice, and both times you asked for a loan." "Enough," Amelia intervened, but her tone wasn't sharp with Bianca, it was sharp with me. "Riley, lower your voice, you're making a scene." "She's attacking me, Mom," I said, looking to her for support. I had always been the reliable one, the steady one. Bianca was the wild card, the one they coddled. But surely in this they saw the truth. Amelia adjusted her pearl necklace, refusing to meet my gaze. "Bianca is just stressed. We all are. And well, there are questions, Riley. Valid questions." Before I could ask what she meant, the heavy oak doors opened. Mr. Henderson, the family attorney who had handled Grandfather Arthur's affairs for decades, stepped out. He looked uncomfortable. He was sweating, despite the aggressively cool air conditioning. "Please," he said, gesturing to the conference room. "Come in." We filed in. I took the seat closest to the door, feeling like an intruder in my own family. Mr. Henderson shuffled his papers. He cleared his throat once, twice. "As you know," he began, "Arthur left a last will and testament dated 5 years ago. However," he paused, looking directly at Cameron. "A new document was presented to me yesterday morning. A codicil dated 3 weeks prior to his death." My heart hammered against my ribs. Arthur hadn't mentioned a codicil. We talked about everything. "This codicil," Henderson continued, his voice tight, "effectively restructures the distribution of the estate. It names Cameron and Amelia as the executors and sole beneficiaries of the property portfolio. It grants a lump sum of $2 million to Bianca. He stopped. And Riley, I asked, my voice trembling, what about the charitable trust we talked about, the house? Henderson looked down at his desk. The codicil states that Riley is to be disinherited entirely. The room spun. Why? Due to, Henderson read from the paper, evidence of financial misconduct and misappropriation of funds during the time she served as my primary caregiver. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's a lie. I never took a dime. I used my own savings to buy his groceries half the time. Sit down, Riley, Cameron said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the mahogany table. It slid across the polished surface and stopped right in front of me. We know about the withdrawals, Cameron said. We know about the cash transfers. Bianca found the statements. What withdrawals? I stammered. I reached for the envelope, my hands shaking so badly I could barely open it. Inside were bank statements, dozens of them. Highlighted in neon yellow were cash withdrawals. Thousands of dollars. I didn't make these, I gasped. Grandfather asked me to get cash for his poker nights for the gardener for. $10,000 for a gardener? Bianca scoffed. Please, you were skimming. You thought he was too senile to notice, and you thought we were too stupid to check. We're doing you a kindness, Amelia added softly, her face a mask of tragic disappointment. If you contest this, Riley, we will press charges, elder abuse, embezzlement. You'll lose your nursing license. You'll go to prison. I looked at them, my father stone-faced, my mother feigning heartbreak, my sister smirking. They had this planned. They waited until he was cold to ambush me. You're blackmailing me, I whispered. We're protecting the family legacy, Cameron corrected. Sign the waiver, Riley, walk away, or we destroy you. The betrayal hit me harder than the grief. It was a physical blow to the gut. But as I looked at the three of them, sitting in a united front of greed, a sudden, sharp memory of Grandfather Arthur cut through the fog. Always keep the blue files separate. Riley, he had whispered to me during one of his lucid moments a month ago. The sharks swim close when the water gets bloody. I didn't sign. I looked at my father, tears drying on my cheeks, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I'm not signing anything, I said. And you better hope your evidence holds up because I'm going to fight you. Then you're a fool, Cameron said. But as I walked out of that office, leaving my family behind, I knew the betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. They had just declared war on the one person who knew exactly where the bodies were buried. The drive home was a blur of red taillights and blinding tears. I didn't go back to my apartment. I went straight to the house, Grandfather Arthur's house. I still had the keys. Technically, according to them, I was trespassing now. According to them, I was a thief who had pillaged a dying man's fortune. The accusation made my skin crawl. I let myself in. The house smelled of old books, lemon polish, and the faint, lingering scent of the lavender oil I used in his humidifier. It was silent, a tomb of memories. I walked into the study, the room where Arthur had spent most of his life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Bianca. Don't make this hard, Rye. Mom is really upset. Just sign the papers and we won't call the police. You can keep the car. Zox. The audacity was breathtaking. You can keep the car. The 2010 Honda Civic that I bought with my own money, how generous. I sat at his heavy oak desk, running my hand over the leather blotter. I needed to think. I needed to process what had just happened. My parents weren't just siding with Bianca, they were the architects. Cameron's business had been struggling for years. Arthur had mentioned it. He had refused to bail Cameron out the last time, saying, "A man who cannot manage his own greed will never manage my legacy." That was it. That was the motive. They needed the liquidity. And Bianca, she just wanted the cash to fund her influencer lifestyle, which was really just unemployed luxury. I felt a wave of nausea. I had spent 3 years sleeping on a cot in the guest room, waking up every 2 hours to turn him so he wouldn't get bed sores, hand-feeding him when his tremors got too bad. I had sacrificed my social life, my dating life, and stalled my career advancement to be here. And they had been waiting for him to die so they could cash out. I pulled up the bank app on my phone, checking my own accounts. I had nothing significant. I had depleted my savings to keep the house running when Arthur's accounts were temporarily frozen during a bank merger last year, money he had promised to pay back, but we never got around to the paperwork because his health declined so rapidly. The evidence they showed me, the highlighted withdrawals, I knew what those were. Arthur had a penchant for vintage watches and anonymous donations. He didn't trust online banking for certain things. He liked cash. I withdrew it for him, yes, but I always gave him the envelope. What he did with it after that was his business. But how could I prove it? It was my word against the paper trail. I started tearing through the desk drawers. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew Arthur. He was paranoid. He was brilliant. He was a man who recorded his bridge games because he didn't trust his friends to keep score correctly. "Come on, Arthur," I whispered to the empty room. "You didn't leave me high and dry. I know you didn't." I found nothing in the usual spots. The safe in the closet was empty. Cameron must have cleared it out immediately after the ambulance left. The filing cabinets were thinned out. They had sanitized the place. My despair began to curdle into panic. If they had cleared the house, they had cleared the evidence. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. Had they followed me? Did they call the police? I crept to the window and peered through the blinds. It wasn't the police. It was a courier. I opened the door cautiously. "Delivery for a Ms. Riley? No last name on the docket, just Riley at this address." The young man asked, chewing gum. "That's me." He handed me a small, heavy box wrapped in brown paper. "Sign here." I signed. He left. I carried the box into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. My hands were still shaking. I sliced the tape and opened the flaps. Inside sat a vintage dictaphone, the kind Arthur used to use in the 90s, and a single, handwritten note on his personalized stationery. "Riley, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if you have received this box, it means the Vulture Protocol has been activated. I instructed my friend to send this only if my primary will was challenged or if the trio, as I affectionately call your parents and sister, tried to maneuver you out. They think I didn't see them looking at the silver while I was still eating with it. Listen to the tape, and then call the number on the back of this note. Do not speak to Henderson again. He has no spine. Love, Arthur." I dropped the note. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, a hysterical, jagged sound, Vulture Protocol. Even from the grave, the old man was playing 4D chess. I picked up the dictaphone and pressed play. Arthur's voice, weak but sharp, crackled into the kitchen. "Test, test, okay. Riley, listen carefully. The amended will they are going to show you or have shown you is a forgery. Or, more accurately, it was signed under duress. I'm going to tell you exactly how they did it, and then I'm going to tell you about the ace up our sleeve." I pressed stop, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the weapon. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Arthur never bluffed. The next 3 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Cameron and Amelia didn't stop at the threat in the lawyer's office. They began a campaign of isolation. Family friends I had known since childhood stopped returning my calls. When I ran into Mrs. Gable at the grocery store, a woman who had knit me sweaters when I was 5, she hurriedly turned her cart down the cereal aisle to avoid me. They were spreading the narrative. Poor Riley. The stress of caregiving broke her. She started stealing. It's so tragic. I saw the social media posts. Bianca was posting tribute, photos of her and Arthur, photos from 5 years ago because she hadn't taken any recent ones. Rest in peace, Grandpapa. Breaks my heart that people you trust can betray you in your final moments. Karma is real. Family first betrayal healing. The caption made me want to throw my phone through the wall. I spent my days huddled in my apartment. I had left Arthur's house before they could catch me there, transcribing the tapes. The story Arthur laid out was horrifying. 6 months ago, when I had taken a rare weekend off to attend a medical conference, Cameron and Bianca had visited. They brought documents for him to sign, supposedly regarding the renewal of the insurance on the estate, but slipped in between the pages was the codicil. Arthur, his vision failing, had hesitated. "Your father held my hand, Riley," Arthur's voice said on the tape. "He squeezed it, hard. He told me that if I didn't sign the papers to simplify the estate, they would have you committed. They told me they had evidence you were unstable, that they would put you in a facility and I would die alone in a state home." The recording captured the sound of Arthur weeping. "I was scared, kiddo, not for me, for you, so I signed their damn paper. But then, I made a phone call." I paused the tape, wiping tears from my face. They had threatened him with my safety to get his money. It wasn't just greed, it was evil. The antagonist wasn't just Bianca. It was the trio, a hydra of entitlement. But Bianca was the face of it. She was the one driving the narrative. I decided I needed to see the enemy up close one last time before I made my move. I went to the house. I knew they would be there, inventorying the assets. I parked down the street and walked up. The front door was open. Movers were already there. "Careful with that," Bianca's voice rang out. "That vase is Ming. It's worth more than your van." I stepped into the foyer. Bianca was standing there, holding a glass of champagne, directing 3 burly men who were hauling out Arthur's antique armoire. "You're selling the furniture?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "The will hasn't even been probated yet." Bianca spun around, nearly spilling her drink. "Riley, I thought we told you to stay away." "I'm just curious," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Grandfather loved that armoire. He kept grandmother's wedding dress in there." "It's old and smells like mothballs," Bianca said, waving her hand dismissively. "I'm liquidating the junk to update the interior. I'm moving in next month, obviously." "Obviously," I said. Cameron walked in from the study, holding a stack of leather-bound books, first editions. "What is she doing here?" he barked. "Just saying goodbye," I lied, "and giving you one last chance." Cameron laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "A chance for what to beg?" "To tell the truth," I said. "Drop the fake codicil. Admit you coerced him. We can split the estate 3 ways, fair and square. Just don't do this." I needed them to reject the offer. I needed to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there was no redemption for them. Emilia appeared at the top of the stairs, looking down like a queen on a balcony. "You have until Friday to vacate your apartment, Riley. We own the building, remember? The trust holds the deed, and since the trust is now ours." "You're evicting me?" I asked. "We're managing our assets," Emilia said coldly. "We can't have a tenant who steals." "Get out," Bianca sneered, "before I call the cops and have you dragged out." I looked at them, my father holding the books he never read, my mother evicting her daughter to save a few bucks, my sister selling heirlooms for champagne money. "Okay," I said, "I'm leaving." I turned to go but stopped at the door. "Oh, Bianca, that watch you're wearing." She looked at her wrist. "What about it?" "Grandfather didn't pay for it," I said softly. "He told me he bought you a replica because he knew you'd lose the real one. The receipt for the knockoff is in the blue file." Her face went slack. "See you in court," I said. I walked to my car, my hands steady for the first time in days. I pulled out the piece of paper Arthur had left me, the one with the phone number on the back. I dialed. "Law Offices of Alastair Sterling," a crisp British voice answered. "How may I direct your call?" "Tell Mr. Sterling that the Vulture Protocol is active," I said. "I'm Riley, and I'm ready to burn the house down." The address Arthur had left me led to a part of the city I rarely visited, the historic financial district, where the buildings were made of stone that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. It wasn't a glass skyscraper. It was a discreet, four-story brownstone with a heavy iron gate and no plaque. I pressed the buzzer. A camera swiveled to look at me. "Riley," the voice was the same crisp British baritone from the phone. "Yes," I said, clutching my bag to my chest. "I'm here to see Mr. Sterling." The gate buzzed open. Inside, the office felt less like a law firm and more like a private library. Walls lined with mahogany bookshelves stretched up to a coffered ceiling. A fire crackled in a hearth that looked like it belonged in a Victorian manor. Standing by the window, pouring tea from a silver service, was a man who looked to be in his 60s. He wore a three-piece suit that fit him with architectural precision. "Arthur always said you were the punctual one," Alastair Sterling said, turning to face me. He didn't smile, but his eyes were kind, sharp, intelligent, and piercingly blue. "Tea? It's Earl Grey, Arthur's favorite." Yes, thank you," I stammered, taking the delicate china cup he offered. My hands were still trembling slightly. "Mr. Sterling, I don't understand. Who are you? I thought Henderson was grandfather's only lawyer." "Henderson is a paper pusher," Sterling said, taking a seat in a wingback chair opposite me. "He handles the mundane. Real estate transfers, tax filings. He is useful for the tedious, but he lacks spine. Arthur came to me 10 years ago when he realized his son, your father, had a gambling problem that Henderson was too polite to mention." I nearly dropped my cup. "Gambling, Cameron." Sterling nodded slowly. "And high-risk venture capital, a dangerous combination. Your father has been insolvent for nearly a decade, Riley. Arthur bilaid him out 3 times. The last time, 2 years ago, Arthur refused. That is when the resentment started." He opened a file on the low table between us. It wasn't a blue file, it was black leather. Anticipated this," Sterling continued. He knew that as his health declined, the vultures, his word, would circle. He established the vulture protocol to protect his legacy and, more importantly, to protect you. "Protect me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "They're destroying me. They're trying to take my license. They kicked me out of my home." "They are doing exactly what we need them to do," Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave. "They are overextending. They are documenting their own greed." He slid a photo across the table. It was a picture of a document the codicil Henderson had shown me. "This document," Sterling said, tapping the photo, "is legally binding on the surface. Henderson believes it is real. The courts will believe it is real, unless we prove 2 things, fraud and coercion." "I know they forced him," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "I heard it on the tape." "The tape is good," Sterling conceded. "But in a court of law, a defense attorney, even a mediocre one, could argue Arthur was confused, or that he was role-playing, or that the tape was doctored. We need more. We need them to commit a crime on the record." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "Riley, we are not just going to fight the will. We are going to let them think they have one. We are going to let them lie under oath. And then, when they have cemented their perjury, we are going to drop the hammer." "What do I have to do?" I asked. "You need to play the victim a little longer," Sterling said. "I will file a motion to contest the will, but I will not put my name on it yet. I will have a junior associate file it, someone who looks inexperienced. We need them to feel superior. We need them to get sloppy." He handed me a thick envelope. Inside is a list of assets Arthur placed in a blind trust 5 years ago. This trust activates only upon proof of malicious interference by his heirs. Your job is to get that proof. You need to get them to admit, in writing or on recording, that they planned this before he died. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, like a weapon. "I can do that," I said, thinking of Bianca's arrogance. "They think I'm stupid. They'll brag." "Good," Sterling said. "But be careful, Riley. A cornered animal bites, and your family. They have very sharp teeth." The deposition took place 2 weeks later in a rented conference room downtown. Sterling had been right. They didn't take me seriously. When I walked in, flanked only by a young, nervous-looking attorney named David, who was actually one of Sterling's sharpest proteges acting the part, my parents and Bianca barely looked up. They were seated on one side of the long glass table, looking like a portrait of grieving elegance. Cameron was in a charcoal suit, Emilia in black silk, and Bianca was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my annual salary. Mr. Henderson sat at the head of the table, looking bored. A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers hovering over her steno machine. "Let's get this over with," Cameron said, checking his watch. "We have a meeting with the realtors at 2. "This won't take long," David squeaked, adjusting his glasses. "We just have a few questions regarding the timeline of the codicil." I sat silently, my hands folded on the table. I had a small notebook in front of me. Hidden inside my purse, my phone was recording, though Sterling had warned me it might not be admissible. The real record was the court reporter. "Mr. Cameron," David began, "on the date of August 14th, the day the codicil was allegedly signed, where were you?" "I was at my father's bedside," Cameron said smoothly, "comforting him." "And was he lucid?" "Completely," Emilia interjected. "He was talking about his garden. He was very clear that he wanted to make changes to the will. He felt disappointed in Riley's care." I felt a sharp stab in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. Let them lie, I told myself. Let them dig the hole. "And the witnesses?" David asked. "There are 2 signatures here. John Doe and Jane Smith. Who are they?" Cameron didn't even blink. 2 nurses from the agency. They were passing by in the hall. Arthur asked them to sign. I looked up then. "Which agency, Dad?" Cameron glared at me. "The one you hired, Riley, Care Touch." I smiled. It was a small, sad smile. "That's interesting, because I didn't use an agency. I did all the care myself. And on the weekends, I used a private contractor named Mrs. Higgins. There were no agency nurses." The room went silent. Henderson shifted in his seat. Arthur must have called them himself," Emilia stammered quickly. "He was very resourceful." "So you're saying," I pushed, ignoring David's feigned attempt to silence me, "that a dying man who couldn't lift a telephone receiver without help, called a temp agency, hired 2 random nurses to come over for 10 minutes just to witness a will, and then sent them away without anyone else seeing them?" "Yes," Bianca snapped. "That's exactly what happened. Stop trying to twist things, Riley. You're just mad because you got caught stealing." "Speaking of stealing," I said, turning my gaze to Bianca, "where is the emerald brooch, the one grandmother left specifically to me in the original will?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Bianca said, touching her throat. "It probably got lost in your mess." "Really?" I pulled a piece of paper from my notebook. It was a printout from an online auction site. "Vintage emerald brooch sold by user, Fashion B22. Because Fashion B22 looks a lot like your Instagram handle, Bianca. And this brooch was sold 3 days before Arthur died." Bianca's face went pale, then red. "You little," she started to lunge across the table, but Cameron grabbed her arm. "Enough," Cameron shouted. "This is harassment. Henderson, end this." "We have strict questions regarding the assets," Henderson blustered, trying to regain control. "This deposition is about Riley's embezzlement, not—" "I have one more question," I interrupted, my voice steady. I looked directly at my father. "Dad, did you or did you not take out a bridge loan of $500,000 from Shark Capital using the estate as collateral 2 weeks before the codicil was signed?" Cameron froze. His eyes widened just for a fraction of a second before he masked it. "That is irrelevant and private business information," he hissed. "It goes to motive," David said, his voice suddenly losing its nervous squeak. "If you were in debt, you had a reason to force a signature." "I was not in debt," Cameron roared, slamming his hand on the table. "I am a successful businessman, and I will not be interrogated by my failure of a daughter and her discount lawyer." "We're done," Emilia said, standing up. She looked at me with pure venom. "You want to fight, Riley? Fine, you'll regret this. We were going to let you keep your license. But now, we're going to burn you to the ground." They stormed out. Henderson gathered his papers, shooting me a dirty look, and followed. When the door clicked shut, David exhaled and looked at me. A slow grin spread across his face. "We got them," he said. "They denied the debt on record, and they lied about the nurses." "Is it enough?" I asked, feeling physically ill from the confrontation. "It's a start," David said, "but your mother's threat. Take it seriously, Riley. They're going to come for you now." My mother didn't make idle threats. 2 days after the deposition, I was called into the director of nursing's office at the hospital. My ID badge didn't work on the door scanner. That was the first bad sign. Inside, the director, a woman named Sarah who had mentored me for 5 years, wouldn't meet my eyes. Sitting next to her was a human resources representative I had never met. "Riley," Sarah said, her voice tight, "please sit down." "What's going on?" I asked, though I already knew. My stomach was churning acid. "We received a formal complaint," the HR rep said, sliding a paper across the desk, "alleging that you have been diverting narcotics, specifically opioids for personal use and for sale." "That's a lie," I stood up. "You know me, Sarah, you know I would never." "The complaint included photographic evidence," Sarah said, looking pained. She turned a glossy photo around. It was a picture of me, taken through a window, handing a bottle of pills to an elderly man. "That's grandfather Arthur," I cried. "Those were his heart medications. I was filling his weekly organizer." "The complaint states it was OxyContin," the HR rep said monotone, "and it claims you were selling them to fund a gambling habit." A gambling habit. They were projecting Cameron's sins onto me. The irony was so sharp it felt like a knife. "This is retaliation," I said, my voice shaking. "My family is trying to discredit me because I'm contesting a will. You have to believe me." "We have to investigate," Sarah said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry, Riley. Until the investigation is complete, you are placed on unpaid administrative leave. You have to surrender your badge." I handed it over. Walking out of the hospital, the place where I had built my life, I felt naked. I felt destroyed. They had taken my home, my inheritance, and now my purpose. I sat in my car in the parking garage and sobbed until my throat was raw. I wanted to give up. I wanted to drive away and never come back. Then my phone rang. "They suspended you," Sterling's voice said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" I choked out. "Because they are predictable," Sterling said. "Riley, listen to me. Dry your tears. This is the moment where most people break, but you are not most people. You are Arthur's granddaughter." "I have nothing left, Mr. Sterling." "You have the truth," he said, "and you have me, and I have found the nurses." I saw. "Tee up straight, the ones who witnessed the will." "Cameron was sloppy," Sterling said, a hint of dark amusement in his voice. "He didn't hire an agency. He hired 2 waitresses from a gentleman's club he frequents. I have a private investigator who tracked them down. They were paid $500 each to sign a paper they didn't read." "Will they testify?" "For immunity, they are practically singing an opera," Sterling said. "But that's not the only thing. We traced the bridge loan Cameron denied. He didn't just borrow money, he committed wire fraud to get it. He forged Arthur's signature on a guarantor form 3 months ago." "So he's a criminal," I whispered. It was one thing to be greedy. It was another to be a felon. "He is desperate," Sterling corrected. "And desperate men make fatal mistakes. Riley, the final hearing regarding the estate distribution is in 3 days. They believe you are broken. They believe you will not show up, or that you will come alone and defeated." "What do we do?" "We let them have their moment," Sterling said. "The hearing is public. Your sister has invited the press, some local lifestyle bloggers, to cover her victory and the launch of her new foundation. They want an audience." I wiped my face, looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but the fear was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard certainty. "Let's give them a show," I said. Meet me at my office tomorrow night, Sterling said. We need to prep. And Riley, wear something formidable. You're not the nurse anymore. You're the CEO of this operation. I hung up. I looked at the hospital one last time, then started the engine. They had taken my job. They had taken my home, but they had forgotten the most important rule of medicine. Before you can cure the infection, you have to cut it out. The courtroom was a sea of polished wood and hushed whispers, but the air felt charged with an electric tension that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Bianca had indeed made this a spectacle. She sat at the front table, draped in a cream-colored designer suit, laughing softly with a woman who held a professional-grade camera. My parents, Cameron and Amelia, sat flanking her, their faces masks of triumphant satisfaction. They looked like a family that had already won. When I walked in, alone and dressed in a sharp, navy blue blazer, the room fell silent for a beat. I saw my mother whisper something to my father, who smirked and checked his gold watch. They expected me to walk to the petitioner's table and crumble. "Is the petitioner ready?" Judge Miller asked, peering over her spectacles. "We are, Your Honor," Henderson said, standing tall. "We have provided the amended will, the bank statements proving Ms. Riley's misconduct, and the sworn statements from the family regarding the late Arthur's wishes. This is a straightforward case of an ungrateful daughter trying to claw back assets she forfeited through her own greed." I stood up. "Your Honor, I would like to call a witness." Henderson laughed, a condescending sound. "Your Honor, this is a probate hearing, not a circus. Riley has no legal representation present." "Actually," a voice boomed from the back of the room, "she has the best representation money can't buy." The heavy double doors at the rear of the courtroom swung open. Alastair Sterling walked down the center aisle with the deliberate, heavy gait of a man who owned the ground he walked on. His presence was so sudden and so commanding that Henderson actually stepped backward, bumping into the table. Cameron's face went from smug to ghostly white in 3 seconds. He gripped the edge of the table so hard I heard the wood groan. Amelia gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "Who are you?" Judge Miller asked, though she looked impressed. "Alastair Sterling, appearing on behalf of the deceased, Arthur, and the primary beneficiary, Riley," he said, stepping up to the bar. "I have here a document that supersedes anything Mr. Henderson has presented. It is an irrevocable trust, filed and time-stamped in the state of Delaware 5 years ago, with a very specific bad actor clause." "That's a lie," Bianca screamed, jumping to her feet. "He's a fake. Dad, tell them he's a fake." "Sit down, Ms. Bianca," the judge warned. Sterling didn't even look at her. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. "With the court's permission, I would like to play a short video. It was recorded by Arthur 6 months ago, during the weekend he was allegedly, lucidly, signing the codicil." The courtroom lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. It was a hidden camera angle from the corner of Arthur's study. It showed Cameron holding Arthur's hand, crushing it onto a piece of paper, while Bianca stood in the background holding a phone. "Just sign it, you old goat," Cameron's voice rang out clearly on the recording. "If you don't, Riley goes to jail. I've already got tea." "He fake receipts. Do you want her to spend her 30s in a cell?" The courtroom was deathly silent. On the screen, a frail Arthur was weeping, his hand shaking as he was forced to sign. "This," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "is the definition of duress. And these 2 women," he gestured to the back, where 2 nervous-looking women in cocktail dresses stood. "These are not nurses. These are employees of the Velvet Lounge, paid by Cameron to perjure themselves today." The judge's face was like stone. "Mr. Henderson, did you vet these witnesses?" Henderson was sweating through his suit. I was told." "I'm not finished," Sterling said, looking directly at my parents. "We have also tracked the narcotics complaint sent to the Board of Nursing. It was sent from a public library computer, but the person in the surveillance footage wearing a large hat and sunglasses. Well, she has a very distinctive gait. Isn't that right, Amelia?" My mother looked like she was about to faint. The bad actor clause is simple, Sterling concluded, handing a packet to the judge. Anyone who attempts to defraud the estate or harm the primary beneficiary, Riley, is immediately and irrevocably disinherited. Furthermore, the trust authorizes the immediate seizure of all assets currently held by the bad actors to compensate for emotional distress. "This is a setup," Cameron roared, his face purple. "You can't do this, that's my money." "No, Cameron," I said, standing up and looking him in the eye for the first time. "It was never your money, it was Arthur's, and he knew you better than you knew yourself." The fallout was swift and total. The judge didn't just invalidate the codicil, she referred the matter to the district attorney. Within an hour of the hearing, Cameron was taken into custody for questioning regarding wire fraud and grand larceny. Emilia followed shortly after, named as a co-conspirator in the framing of a medical professional. Bianca, ever the survivor, tried to flee the courtroom, but Sterling's private investigators were already waiting at the airport. They had a lien on her bank accounts and a court order to repossess every gift Arthur had given her over the last 3 years, as they were deemed fruits of a fraudulent scheme. 2 weeks later, I sat in Arthur's study. The house was quiet again, but this time it felt peaceful. The movers had returned the armoire. The Ming vase was back on its pedestal. Alastair Sterling sat across from me, sipping tea. "Your nursing license has been fully reinstated," he said, sliding a letter across the desk. "The hospital board issued a formal apology. Sarah, your director, would like you to come back as a head of department." "I think I'll take a few months off first," I said, leaning back in Arthur's chair. "There's a lot of charity work Arthur wanted to do. I want to make sure it gets done right." "He would be proud of you, Riley," Sterling said, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "You didn't just win, you took out the trash." I thought of my parents. They were currently out on bail, living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, their social circles having evaporated the moment the Vulture Protocol became public knowledge. Bianca was reportedly working at a high-end retail store just to pay her legal fees, a poetic justice if there ever was one. I reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a small, velvet box. Inside was the emerald brooch. I pinned it to my sweater, the green stone catching the light. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. For the first time in years, I wasn't a caregiver, a victim, or a target. I was just Riley, and I was finally home.